The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent beings. It floated in the darkness between stars, a massive sphere of glass and metal where the rulers of 1,000 worlds gathered to decide the fate of trillions. Ambassador Daniel Carter had walked its halls for 15 years, and he had never felt more tired than he did today. He stood at the human delegation's platform, a small circle of polished stone near the back of the chamber. The placement was intentional. When humanity had joined the council 30 years ago, they were given the worst position, the smallest voice, the least respect. Nothing had changed since then. The Valorian High Speaker stood at the center of the chamber, his crystalline body catching the light from 100 floating orbs. Tesseract was ancient even by Valorian standards, over 4,000 years old, and he had opposed human membership from the very beginning. "The Council has reached a decision," Tesseract announced, his voice echoing through translation devices across the chamber. "Resolution 7892 is passed. The human species is forbidden from expanding beyond their current 17 star systems. Any attempt to colonize new worlds will be considered an act of war against the Galactic Council." Daniel felt his hands tighten into fists at his sides. He looked around the chamber at the other delegations. The Kethmari, tall reptilian creatures with scales the color of dried blood, hissed their approval. The Drelnak, who looked like massive frogs with 4 arms, clicked their mandibles in agreement. The Morveth, the Solani, the Kalthor, every species that humanity had helped over the past 3 decades now voted to cage them like animals. "The reasoning is clear," Tesseract continued. "Humans breed too quickly. They adapt too easily. They are too aggressive, too ambitious. If allowed to expand freely, they will overwhelm the galaxy within 1,000 years. This council has a duty to protect all species from such a threat." Daniel activated his platform's speaking light. The chamber fell silent. "High Speaker," Daniel said, keeping his voice calm even though anger burned in his chest. "May I remind this council of what humanity has done since joining? We answered the distress call from Thesson Prime when no other species would respond. We lost 8,000 soldiers saving Kethmari civilians from the Scarath pirates. We developed the cure for the Drelnak plague that killed millions before our doctors arrived. We have given everything to this council, and this is how you repay us?" The Sarek's crystalline face showed no emotion. "Your contributions are noted, Ambassador. They do not change the fundamental threat your species represents. The decision is final." Daniel looked at the faces around him. He saw fear in some, hatred in others, and indifference in most. 30 years of service, 30 years of sacrifice, and humanity was still nothing but a problem to be contained. He thought of his daughter Laura back on Earth. She was pregnant with her first child, Daniel's first grandchild. That child would grow up in a galaxy that saw humans as monsters, that wanted to lock them away in a tiny corner of space and forget they existed. Something broke inside Daniel Carter at that moment. Something that had been bending for 30 years finally snapped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his personal communicator. Every ambassador in the chamber had one. They were supposed to be used only for emergencies. Daniel activated it and spoke clearly. "Secretary General Park, this is Ambassador Carter. They have passed the expansion restriction. 17 systems, no growth, no exceptions. I am requesting authorization for Protocol Omega." The chamber buzzed with confused murmurs. No one knew what Protocol Omega meant. It had been created in secret, known only to the highest levels of human government. It was the plan for the unthinkable, the complete withdrawal of humanity from galactic civilization. Kevin Park's voice came through the communicator, calm and steady. "Authorization granted, Ambassador. Bring our people home." Daniel turned off the communicator and looked up at Tesseract. "High Speaker, I have an announcement to make on behalf of the United Human Nations." The chamber fell silent again. Effective immediately. Humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. All human diplomats, traders, aid workers, scientists, and military personnel will return to human space within 30 standard days. All treaties, agreements, and obligations between humanity and Council species are hereby terminated. For the first time in his 4,000 years, Tesseract showed surprise. His crystalline body flickered with colors that Daniel had never seen before. Ambassador, you cannot simply leave. No species has ever left the Council. Then we will be the first, Daniel replied. You have made it clear that humanity is not welcome here. You see us as a threat to be contained rather than a partner to be respected. Very well. We accept your judgment. We will return to our 17 systems and trouble you no more. He stepped down from his platform and began walking toward the exit. The other members of the human delegation followed him without hesitation. They had all known this day might come. They had all prepared for it. Ambassador Carter, Tesseract called out, you are making a grave mistake. Humanity cannot survive alone. You need the Council's technology, our trade networks, our protection. Daniel stopped at the door and turned back one last time. He looked at the vast chamber, filled with the representatives of 1,000 worlds, all of them watching him with a mixture of confusion and relief. High Speaker, humanity survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and near extinction. We climbed out of the mud and reached for the stars with nothing but our bare hands and stubborn refusal to die. We joined your council hoping to find friendship among the stars. Instead, we found only fear and contempt. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was harder than before. You wanted us gone. Now you have your wish. But remember this moment, Tesseract. Remember it when the darkness comes and there are no humans left to hold it back. Remember it when you finally understand what you have thrown away. Daniel Carter walked out of the Galactic Council chamber and never looked back. Within hours, human ships across the galaxy began their journey home. Doctors packed up their medical equipment and left hospitals half full of alien patients. Engineers shut down the power plants they had built and the water treatment facilities they had designed. Soldiers withdrew from border posts and patrol routes that had kept dozens of species safe for decades. The Council watched them go with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The troublesome humans were finally leaving. Everything would return to normal now. Everything would be better. They had no idea how wrong they were. 6 months after humanity left the Galactic Council, Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of his patrol ship and watched the stars. The vessel was called Relentless, and it guarded the invisible line that now separated human space from the rest of the galaxy. His orders were simple. No human ship goes out. No alien ship comes in. For the first time in 50 years, humanity was completely alone. Marcus had served in joint patrols with alien species for most of his career. He had fought alongside Kethamari warriors and shared meals with Drelnak engineers. He had believed in the dream of galactic cooperation. Now that dream was dead, and he was surprised to find that he did not miss it as much as he expected. The truth was, humanity had always done most of the work. They had always been the ones who answered distress calls in the middle of the night. They had always been the ones who volunteered for the dangerous missions. And they had always been the ones who received nothing but suspicion in return. Now, for the first time, humans could focus on themselves. And they were doing remarkable things. Back on Earth, Secretary General Kevin Park addressed the United Human Nations Assembly. We have been given a gift, he told them. The Council wanted to cage us, but instead they have freed us. No more restrictions on our research. No more limits on our expansion within our own space. No more begging for permission to exist. The Assembly cheered. Humanity had discovered something unexpected in their isolation. They liked being alone. They liked not having to explain themselves to species that would never understand them. They liked being able to make decisions without waiting for approval from beings who feared them. While humanity thrived, the rest of the galaxy began to fall apart. The Valorian trade routes had been protected by joint patrols for centuries. Human ships had made up 60% of those patrols, and human tacticians had designed most of the defense strategies. Without them, the routes became hunting grounds for pirates. The Scarath Syndicate had always lurked at the edges of civilized space, raiding ships and attacking colonies when they thought they could get away with it. Human patrol ships had kept them in check for decades. Now there were no human ships, and the Scarath grew bold. Within 3 months, pirate attacks increased by 400%. Trade ships refused to travel without massive escorts. Prices for basic goods doubled, then tripled. Colonies that depended on imported food began to starve. The Council demanded that other species increase their patrols, but no one wanted to volunteer. The Valorians had grown soft after centuries of letting humans do the dangerous work. The Kethmari were fierce warriors, but they had no talent for the patient, methodical work of hunting pirates. The Drelnak were engineers, not fighters. On the agricultural world of Thesson Prime, the Kethmari faced a different kind of disaster. 20 years ago, human scientists had helped them develop new crops that could grow in their harsh soil. The crops had transformed their world from a barren wasteland into a garden that fed billions. But the crops required special fertilizers, and only humans knew how to make them. When humanity left, they took that knowledge with them. The Kethmari tried to reverse engineer the formula, but their scientists could not figure it out. Human biotechnology was decades ahead of everyone else. The harvest failed. The next one failed too. Famine spread across 7 colony worlds. Millions of Kethmari went hungry, and many began to die. Far away, Dr. Michelle Santos heard about the famine and felt a twist of guilt in her stomach. She had spent 20 years curing alien diseases and solving alien problems. She had saved more non-human lives than she could count. Now she worked at the Terran Institute of Sciences, focusing only on human research. Part of her wanted to help the Kethmari. She remembered the children she had treated on their worlds, the grateful parents who had wept when their sons and daughters recovered. But she also remembered how those same Kethmari had voted to cage humanity like animals, how they had hissed their approval when the expansion restriction passed. The Drelnak faced their own crisis. A new plague emerged on their outer rim colonies, a disease that attacked their respiratory systems and killed within days. Their doctors had no idea how to stop it. Michelle could have cured it in weeks. She had cured similar diseases before. The solution was obvious to her, the kind of puzzle she could solve in her sleep. But no one asked for her help, and she did not offer it. The plague spread from world to world. Millions died. The Drelnak begged the Council for assistance, but the Council had no one to send. All their best medical researchers had been human, and the humans were gone. Admiral Scott Palmer watched these events from his command center on Mars. He had spent decades serving under Council restrictions, forced to limit human military development to avoid frightening their alien allies. Now there were no allies, and there were no restrictions. Human shipyards worked around the clock. The Terran Defense Fleet grew from 300 vessels to over 2,000 in 18 months. New weapon systems came online, technologies that the Council had forbidden humans from developing. Quantum cannons that could tear through any known shield. Stealth systems that made ships invisible to all sensors. Fighter craft so fast and maneuverable that no alien pilot could match them. The Council sent 17 separate delegations to the human border requesting humanitarian assistance. Each time, they were politely but firmly turned away. "We understand you are experiencing difficulties," the human border officers would say. "Unfortunately, we are no longer members of the Galactic Council and cannot involve ourselves in Council affairs. We wish you the best of luck in resolving your problems." The final delegation was led by a Valorian diplomat named Kairis. She had been chosen because she had always argued for better treatment of humans. She had opposed the expansion restriction. She had warned the council that this would happen. Kevin Park agreed to meet her at the border station. She pleaded with him for hours, describing the suffering across the galaxy, the famines and plagues and pirate attacks. She promised that things would change if humanity returned. Kevin listened to everything she said. Then he shook his head. "You wanted us gone," he told her. "For 30 years, you treated us like dangerous animals. You restricted our growth, limited our technology, and voted to cage us forever. Well, you won. We are gone. Now live with the consequences." Kairos returned to the council with nothing. The chamber was half empty when she delivered her report. Many species had already stopped attending meetings, too busy dealing with their own crises to care about galactic politics. High Speaker Tesseract listened to her report in silence. For the first time in his long life, he began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. But by then, it was already too late. 2 years after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, Commander Nicole Hayes received a message that would change history. She was stationed at Outpost Sentinel, a small military base at the edge of human space. Her job was simple: watch the border, report any activity, turn away anyone who tried to cross. It was boring work, but Nicole did not mind. After years of serving alongside aliens who feared her species, she enjoyed the peace and quiet. The message came from a Kethmari transport ship drifting just outside the border. Its engines were failing. Its life support was dying. Inside were over 10,000 civilians, mostly women and children, fleeing the destruction of their homeworld. Nicole pulled up the tactical data and felt her stomach turn. The Thesson system had fallen to the Scareth Syndicate 3 days ago. The pirates had overwhelmed the weak defenses and burned everything. Millions of Kethmari were dead, and millions more were running for their lives in whatever ships they could find. This transport was one of many. It had been damaged during the escape and had limped toward the only safe place its captain could think of: human space. Nicole opened a communication channel. The face that appeared on her screen was a Kethmari female, her scales pale with exhaustion and fear. Behind her, Nicole could see children huddled together, crying softly. "Human vessel," the captain said, her voice breaking. "Please. I know we have no right to ask. I know what my people did to yours. But there are children aboard. They will die if you do not help us." Nicole stared at the screen for a long moment. She thought about all the times the Kethmari had looked at humans with disgust. She thought about how they had hissed their approval when the council voted to cage humanity forever. She thought about the cold satisfaction she should feel watching them suffer. But when she looked at those children, she felt none of that. She only felt the same thing she had always felt when she saw innocent beings in danger: the overwhelming need to help them. She turned to her communications officer. "Contact Luna Station. Tell them we have incoming refugees, and they need to prepare medical facilities and temporary housing." Her crew stared at her in shock. "Commander," one of them said, "our orders are to turn away all alien vessels. If you do this, you could be court-martialed." "Then they can court-martial me," Nicole replied. "I did not join the Navy to watch children die." She opened the channel again. "Kethmari vessel, this is Commander Nicole Hayes of the Terran Defense Force. Prepare to be escorted to humanitarian processing on Luna Station. Welcome to human space." The news spread across the galaxy within hours. A human officer had defied orders to save alien refugees. The Kethmari captain told everyone who would listen about the human woman who had shown mercy when no one else would. Back on Earth, the incident sparked the biggest political debate since the withdrawal. Senator Greg Marshall led the opposition, arguing that humanity should maintain strict isolation. They treated us like monsters for 30 years, he shouted in the assembly hall. They voted to cage us, to limit us, to control us. Why should we help them now? Senator Amanda Torres led the other side. Because that is who we are, she replied. We have always been the species that helps those in need. If we abandon that, we become exactly what they accused us of being. The debate raged for weeks. More refugee ships arrived at the border every day. Some commanders followed Nicole's example and let them through. Others turned them away. Humanity was divided. The solution came from an unexpected source. Ryan Cooper was a retired admiral who had fought in some of humanity's most difficult battles. He had watched the Council treat his species with contempt for decades. He had supported the withdrawal completely, but he was also old enough to remember why humanity had reached for the stars in the first place. He proposed something called the Terran Compact. It was simple. Any species that wanted human help would have to do three things. First, they had to formally recognize human sovereignty and equality. Second, they had to apologize for their past treatment of humanity. Third, they had to agree to mutual defense and fair trade. Any species that met these conditions could become an associate member of a new human-led alliance. They would receive protection, humanitarian aid, and access to human technology. In return, they would treat humans as partners, not threats. The Kethmari were the first to sign. Their ambassador arrived at Luna Station with a delegation of their most respected leaders. They stood before a human audience and spoke words that no alien had ever spoken before. "We were wrong," the ambassador said. "We feared you because you were different. We tried to control you because we did not understand you. We treated you as enemies when you only wanted to be friends. For all of this, we apologize. We ask for your forgiveness, and we ask for the chance to start again." The room was silent. Then, slowly, the humans began to applaud. It was not forgiveness. That would take time. But it was a beginning. Within 6 months, 4 more species had joined the compact. The Morveth came first, desperate for protection from the pirates that raided their mining colonies. The Solani followed, their medical researchers eager to work alongside human scientists. Even some Drelnak communities applied for membership, willing to humble themselves in exchange for the plague cures that only humans could provide. The Galactic Council watched in horror as its members defected one by one. High Speaker Tesseract called emergency meeting after emergency meeting, but the chamber grew emptier each time. The species that remained were angry and frightened, blaming each other for the disaster they had created. Tesseract finally understood what he had done. By trying to contain humanity, he had only proven how much the galaxy needed them. By pushing them away, he had created a rival power that was growing stronger every day. He sent a personal message to Secretary General Kevin Park, requesting a private meeting. He was willing to offer whatever concessions were necessary to bring humanity back to the Council. Kevin's reply was short. "We are not interested in returning to the Council, High Speaker. But the Terran Compact is always accepting new applications. If the Valorian people wish to apologize for their treatment of humanity and recognize us as equals, they are welcome to apply like everyone else." Tesseract read the message 3 times. He could not believe what he was seeing. The humans were not just refusing to return, they were offering the Valorians the chance to join them as subordinates. It was the greatest insult in Valorian history, and Tesseract knew, with a cold certainty, that it was exactly what his people deserved. But pride was a powerful thing, and the Valorians had more pride than any species in the galaxy. They would never apologize. They would never admit they were wrong. Instead, they would try one last desperate gamble to restore their power. They would remind the humans why the galaxy had feared them for so long. They would go to war. Admiral Lisa Chen had been preparing for this moment her entire career. She stood on the bridge of the Terran flagship Unconquerable, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. 800 Valorian warships were gathering at the Kepler Passage, the only route into human space large enough for an invasion fleet. They thought they were being subtle. They thought the humans did not know. They were wrong about everything. Lisa had joined the Navy 40 years ago, back when humans were still new to the galaxy. She had served on joint patrols with Valorian officers who treated her like a servant. She had watched her species beg for scraps of respect while doing all the hard work. She had swallowed her pride 1,000 times because that was what the council demanded. Now, there was no council. Now, there were no restrictions. And now, the Valorians were about to learn what humans could really do when they stopped holding back. She turned to her communications officer. "Send the alert to all fleet commanders. Execute Operation Thunderstrike." Across human space, 2,000 warships began to move. They had been waiting for this moment, hidden in asteroid fields and behind moons, their engines cold and their systems dark. Now they came alive all at once, a swarm of steel and fire converging on the Kepler Passage. The Valorians had no idea what was coming. High Speaker Thessarak had ordered the attack personally. He believed that a show of force would remind the galaxy who was really in charge. He believed that humans, despite their bold words, would surrender when faced with the might of the Valorian First Fleet. He believed that 800 warships were more than enough to crush any resistance. He was wrong about all of it. Captain Chris Morton led the fighter wing that would break the Valorian center. His squadron was called the Hellcats, 12 pilots in the fastest ships ever built by human hands. They had trained together for 2 years, running simulations against every enemy the computers could imagine. They had never lost. Chris watched the Valorian fleet through his cockpit window. Their ships were beautiful in a cold way, all sharp angles and glowing crystals. They had been the most powerful vessels in the galaxy for thousands of years. No one had ever defeated them in open battle. "All Hellcats, this is Morton," Chris said into his radio. "Remember your training. Stay together, hit hard, and show these crystal bastards what humans can do." The battle began with a single shot. A Valorian destroyer fired on a human scout ship that had wandered too close to their formation. It was a warning shot, meant to intimidate. Instead, it gave Admiral Chen exactly what she needed. "They fired first," she announced across all channels. "All units, weapons free." The human fleet erupted. Quantum torpedoes streaked across the void, weapons that the Council had forbidden humans from developing. They did not fly through space like normal missiles. Instead, they disappeared and reappeared inside enemy ships, bypassing shields entirely. Valorian vessels exploded from within, their crews never knowing what hit them. Electronic warfare systems activated, technologies that humans had invented in secret during their years of isolation. The Valorian ships used networked targeting computers, all connected to a central command ship. Human hackers broke into that network in seconds and turned it against itself. Point defense cannons that were supposed to shoot down missiles began firing at friendly vessels instead. The Valorians tried to respond, but they were too slow. Their tactics had not changed in centuries. They still fought the same way they had fought when they first conquered the galaxy, relying on superior numbers and overwhelming firepower. Against most species, this worked perfectly. Against humans, it was suicide. Chris Morton and his Hellcats tore through the enemy formation like wolves through sheep. Human fighters were smaller and faster than anything the Valorians had ever faced. They dodged between the massive warships, too quick to target, too nimble to catch. Behind them, they left destruction. Chris personally destroyed 17 enemy vessels in the first 20 minutes. His wingman, Lieutenant Amy Park, got 22. The Hellcats moved as one unit, each pilot knowing exactly where the others would be, each attack perfectly coordinated. The Valorian commander tried to rally his forces. He ordered his ships to form a defensive sphere, concentrating their firepower. It was a good strategy against a conventional enemy. Admiral Chen had anticipated it. "All capital ships, execute maneuver Omega-7, she ordered. The human fleet split into 3 groups, each attacking from a different direction. The Valorians could not defend against all 3 at once. They tried to rotate their formation, but human ships were faster. Every time they turned to face one threat, another attacked from behind. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, 400 Valorian warships were destroyed. 300 more were damaged beyond repair. The remaining 100 fled in chaos, their formation shattered, their morale broken. Human losses were minimal. 12 ships damaged, 2 destroyed. 87 crew members killed. It was the most lopsided victory in galactic military history. Admiral Chen watched the Valorian survivors run. Part of her wanted to chase them, to finish what they had started. But that was not the human way. Humanity had never wanted war. They had only wanted to be left alone. She opened a channel that would broadcast across the entire galaxy. "This is Admiral Lisa Chen of the Terran Defense Force. The Valorian First Fleet crossed into human space with hostile intent. They have been defeated. What remains of their force has been expelled." She paused, letting her words sink in across 1,000 worlds. "To High Speaker Tesseract and the Galactic Council, I have this message. We came to the stars seeking friendship. We found only contempt. We asked for equality. We received chains. You taught us that the galaxy respects only strength. Lesson learned." Her voice hardened. "Our borders are closed. Our space is sovereign. Any vessel that enters without permission will be destroyed. We are done asking for acceptance. We are done begging for respect. Leave us alone, or the next time your ships cross our border, none will return." She ended the transmission. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the recording in stunned silence. The Valorians, who had ruled unchallenged for millennia, had been crushed in less than an hour. The humans, who had been dismissed as a minor nuisance, had revealed themselves as the most dangerous military force in existence. High Speaker Tesseract received the news in his private chamber. His crystalline body flickered through colors of rage, then fear, then something that might have been despair. He had gambled everything on one attack, and he had lost. The Valorians would never threaten human space again, but more importantly, the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. They were no longer the eager newcomers desperate for acceptance. They were no longer the helpful neighbors who could be taken for granted. They were the species that had beaten the unbeatable, the species that had broken the Valorian Empire in a single battle, the species that had proven, once and for all, that they were not to be underestimated, and they were just getting started. 5 years after humanity walked out of the Galactic Council, President Nathan Cole stood on the observation deck of Unity Station and watched the future being built. The station was massive, larger than any structure humanity had ever created. It floated at the edge of human space, a symbol of everything that had changed. Through the transparent walls, Nathan could see ships from 30 different species coming and going. Traders carrying goods, diplomats negotiating agreements, scientists sharing discoveries, tourists exploring new worlds. The Terran Compact had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a desperate alliance of refugees and outcasts had become the most powerful organization in the galaxy. Species that had once feared humanity now competed for the chance to join them. Nathan remembered the dark days after the withdrawal, when many humans had wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. He remembered the debates, the fears, the uncertainty. Now, all of that seemed like ancient history. Humanity had not just survived isolation, they had thrived. Dr. Tony Reeves joined him at the window. Tony was the scientist who had revolutionized faster-than-light travel during the isolation years. Without council restrictions, he had been free to experiment with theories that alien scientists had dismissed as impossible. Now human ships could cross the galaxy in days instead of weeks. "The new terraforming technology is ready," Tony said. "We can transform a barren world into a garden within a single generation. I wanted you to be the first to know." Nathan nodded slowly. "And we're sharing it freely?" "With all compact members. No restrictions, no payment required. That was the agreement." It was the opposite of how the Council had operated. The old powers had hoarded their technology, using it as a weapon to keep other species dependent and weak. The Compact shared everything. If one species prospered, they all prospered. If one species suffered, they all helped. Some humans had argued against this policy. They said humanity should use their technological advantage to dominate the galaxy, to take revenge for all the years of mistreatment. But President Cole had rejected that path. "We are not building an empire," he had told the Assembly. "We are building a family, and families share." Admiral Megan Price arrived with the morning briefing. She had been a young commander when she let those first Keth Mari refugees into human space. Now she commanded the largest fleet in galactic history. "The Valorians have requested another meeting," she reported. "High Speaker Thesserak has resigned. The new leadership is willing to apologize and apply for compact membership." Nathan was silent for a long moment. The Valorians had been humanity's greatest enemies. They had tried to cage them, and when that failed, they had tried to destroy them. Now they were begging for the chance to join the alliance they had once despised. "Let them apply," Nathan said finally. "They will be treated like any other species, no special privileges, no punishment. Just the same terms everyone else received." Megan raised an eyebrow. "Some people will say we're being too generous." "Some people will always say that. But we did not build the Compact on revenge. We built it on the belief that anyone can change, anyone can grow, anyone can become better than they were. If we abandon that belief, we become exactly what the Council was." On Earth, Ambassador Daniel Carter was celebrating his 80th birthday, surrounded by family. His daughter Laura was there with her 3 children, the grandchildren who had been born into a galaxy that now looked to humanity for leadership instead of fearing them. A reporter had asked Daniel for an interview, wanting to hear the story of the man who had walked out of the council chamber and changed history. Daniel had agreed, though he was uncomfortable with being called a hero. "Was it worth it?" the reporter asked. "All the suffering? All the chaos?" Daniel thought about the question for a long time. He thought about the famines and the plagues and the war. He thought about all the beings who had died because humanity was not there to help them. He thought about the price that had been paid for freedom. "Nothing is free," he said finally. "Everything worth having costs something. The galaxy spent 12,000 years under the Council's rule, and it was stable, yes, but it was also stagnant. Species were kept in their place. Growth was controlled. Change was forbidden." He looked at his grandchildren playing in the garden. "What we did, what we started, it hurt. It caused pain, but it also broke the chains that had held the galaxy back for millennia. Now species can grow. Now they can change. Now they can become whatever they want to be, not just what the Council allows." The reporter nodded. "And humanity? What has this meant for us?" Daniel smiled. "They called us dangerous. They called us unpredictable. They were right. What they did not understand is that we are most dangerous when we are protecting the innocent. Most unpredictable when someone tells us something is impossible." He paused. "We did not burn the galaxy down. We just stopped holding it together. And then, because we could not help ourselves, we started building something better." Far across the galaxy, the great chamber of the Galactic Council sat empty. Dust gathered on the speaking platforms where mighty empires had once debated the fate of trillions. The floating light orbs had gone dark. The translation devices had fallen silent. No one came here anymore. The Council had officially dissolved 2 years ago. its remaining members choosing to join the compact rather than cling to a dying institution. High Speaker Tesseract had been the last to leave, and witnesses said he had wept as he walked out. The chamber would become a museum eventually. Future generations would visit it to learn about the way things used to be, about the old powers who had ruled through fear and control. They would shake their heads at the foolishness of the past and be grateful for the present. On Unity Station, President Cole finished his morning briefings and took a moment to look out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were exploring regions that no one had ever visited. Human scientists were solving problems that had stumped alien researchers for centuries. Human doctors were curing diseases that had killed millions. And all across the compact, species that had once been enemies were learning to be friends. They were trading and building and growing together, united not by force but by choice. It was not perfect. Nothing ever was, but it was better than what had come before. Nathan thought about the journey that had brought them here. 30 years of service to an ungrateful galaxy. A single moment of decision in an alien council chamber. Years of isolation and growth and war. And finally, this. A new dawn for humanity and all the species that had chosen to join them. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. They did not need humanity to survive, but somehow they had discovered that they wanted humanity as partners, as friends, as family. And this time, when humanity extended their hand, it was as equals, or not at all. Outside the window, a Kethmari trading ship passed by, its captain waving at the station. A group of Drelnak children pressed their faces against the glass of a passenger liner, pointing excitedly at the human vessels. A Valorian diplomatic shuttle requested permission to dock, bringing the latest delegation seeking compact membership. The galaxy was changing. The old order was gone. And humanity, the species that had once been told they were too dangerous to be free, was leading the way into a future that no one had imagined possible. Daniel Carter had been right all those years ago. The Council had not understood what they were throwing away. Now they knew, and the galaxy would never be the same.